From the broadcast center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus, this is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
This is the 1:30 news update on 1680 The Crow. I'm Zach Clark. An RCMP expert testifying at Ibrahim Ali's murder trial says his genetic profile is a match to DNA found on the body of the teenage girl he is accused of killing 6 years ago. Christine Crossman has told a BC Supreme Court jury that only DNA from the victim and Ali were found on the body. Ali has pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder in the death of the 13-year-old girl. Opposition BC United House leader Todd Stone is asking the provincial government to form a centralized service to help people in cities recover from wildfires. Stone points out cities like Lytton, which is still waiting for building permits despite being destroyed by a fire 2 years ago. Lytton Mayor Denise O'Connor agreed, saying that rebuilding efforts are mostly community-led, which can feel like a near impossible task for small communities like Lytton and others plagued by fires. September is Suicide Prevention Month. BC Crisis Centre is offering workshops that train people on how to recognize signs of distress in their peers. Sebastian Arancibia has more on this story.
An increasing number of people is seeing the conversation around mental health as more of a community struggle than an individual one. Lou Ripley, Director of Community and Learning at BC Crisis Center, is teaching people how to recognize suicide warning signs.
To be aware of maybe changes that you notice. Maybe the person, for a long time seemed very bubbly, and then you notice a significant change in that behavior. Maybe they stopped doing things that they used to do.
Ripley says people can get information about this workshop called Safe Talk at the Crisis Center website. If you or someone you know is in crisis, you can call BC Crisis Line at 1-800-784-2433. Sebastián Arancibia, 1680 The Crow.
The owners of a Port Alberni commercial fishing vessel have been fined $6,000 and stripped of over $120,000 worth of fish after they were caught fishing without a license. Fisheries and Ocean Canada caught the boat during a routine stop and immediately took them to port for booking and seizure of the fish. An advocacy group in the Peel District of Ontario is asking the district school board to immediately stop its practice of removing books that were published before 2008 from school libraries. Spokesman for the group, Tom Ellard, says the board got rid of books in an effort to keep library collections more relevant. Since then, thousands of books, including The Diary of Anne Frank and many classics, have been removed from school shelves in the Peel area.
I think what's really concerning is the sheer magnitude of the number of books that are being removed. So it would be difficult for us to put a list together because the list is so extensive. It's not banning one or two books at a time. It's the wholesale removal of huge swaths of books from before 2008.
Education Minister Stephen Lech says it's offensive, illogical, and counterintuitive to remove books from past years that educate students on history. The ministry has asked the board to stop removing books based on age. Looking to the U.S., Utah Senator Mitt Romney has announced he won't run for re-election to his seat. Romney was the Republican nominee for U.S. president more than a decade ago, but lost that election to Barack Obama.
The announcement that he's retiring after a single Senate term caps a quarter-century of public service for Mitt Romney, who served as governor of Massachusetts and was once his party's standard-bearer. In an online video, Romney notes he'd be in his mid-80s at the end of another 6-year Senate term.
Frankly, it's time for a new generation of leaders.
Romney's decision to step aside avoids the potential of a GOP primary defeat in Utah. Romney voted to convict Donald Trump at both of his Senate impeachment trials. Stephen Portnoy, ABC News.
In sports news, the Canucks are holding their annual Young Stars Prospect Camp in Penticton this weekend. It includes all their young prospects that are currently under contract in the AHL, ECHL, or junior leagues. It's 19 degrees and cloudy here in Vancouver, a high of 20 with a low of 13. The next 2 days are looking like sunny skies and warm weather before it cools down again for the weekend. Chances of rain on Sunday. That was the 1:30 news update on 1680 The Crow. I'm Zach Clark. Thank you for listening.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.
Everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikki-King.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretnero.
And I'm Radhika Sikki-King. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.
episode of For the Record, we will talk about suicide. If you or someone you know is in crisis, please call 1-800-784-2433. September is Suicide Prevention Month. The conversation around this topic is not an easy one, and more if someone you know is at risk of attempting suicide. This episode's guest, Lou Ripley, is the Director of Community Learning and Engagement at BC Crisis Center. Ripley has more than 30 years of experience on community development and health promotion. Part of her job is training people on how to recognize suicide warning signs. Let's hear on what she has to say on suicide prevention. With children going back to school and adults going back to the grind, how can people recognize in this environment suicide signs in their peers?
Sure. Well, thank you for asking. That's a really great question. How can people recognize? Well, there's a few things that I'd like to point out. One is that we can recognize by starting to kind of destigmatize or humanize suicide, to recognize that many people can struggle with suicide. It's sort of not one type of person. It's not shameful. And I think that often is one of the big barriers in our society, is that we think, oh, it's sort of this type of person, or people who this happens to, or, you know, it wouldn't really be something that would happen to this other kind of person who maybe you have, you know, there's certain judgments about that other person that wouldn't make them likely to think about suicide. So the reality is that we all know that anybody can have thoughts of suicide. That's the first step. And then the second step is to be aware of you know, maybe changes that you notice. You know, maybe the person, you know, for a long time seemed very bubbly, and then you notice a significant change in that behavior. Maybe they stopped doing things that they used to do. Maybe they say things to you like, I can't go on anymore, or I don't want to live. That could be an indication, right? We know that when people go through challenging times, they might say some of these things. And so we can be aware of them. So significant changes, things that someone says, and being able to notice these and even check in with somebody and say what you notice. You know, I noticed that, you know, it's been hard for you the past year. I haven't seen you come to the activities that you normally did. It seems like you're struggling, right? How are you doing? Like checking in with people and just seeing how they are.
Yeah, on the same line, when you started answering this question, you said about the stigmatized, and I wanted to ask you, how do you do that? How do you start opening the conversation, for example, in families, when parents sometimes have a hard time speaking about certain topics like sexuality or the topics? How do we open that conversation in houses, for example?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and something we do training. We offer training for various community members because it's hard. You know, I get it. I'm a parent. I get it. I think for me, it's just sort of being aware that someone having thoughts of suicide doesn't mean that it's not something that we need to be completely afraid of. It might mean that someone's struggling and needs some help within a time of challenge. So trying to destigmatize in that way, to know that it's kind of this balance. We don't want to say, oh, you know, everybody struggles with it. It's no big deal. Just deal with it. And we also don't want to do this other opposite thing and say, oh my goodness, if someone's struggling with suicide, they need to, like, you know, be locked away, right? It's kind of like a balance, right? So noticing, being able to be aware that this is not just something that's happening to your family, for example. It's very much more common than that, and I think that can be really helpful for parents to keep in mind.
And once parents or peers recognize these signs, what are the next steps? What do you do? Like, what do you do after that?
Well, if you recognize that something's going on with someone and they're saying things to you, or you're noticing these changes, or you know, just kind of like, I don't want to live anymore, I can hardly go on anymore, I feel really stuck, there's no worth living. You know, the thing is to kind of even just let the person know, you know, I hear you saying, you know, you don't want to live, and you're not playing soccer anymore, and I'm concerned. Like, again, that I'm concerned. Like, what's going on? Like, do you want to talk about it? And just sort of see what the person says, and to be able, and this is what we do in a lot of our training, to be able to even ask, like sometimes when someone says they don't want to live anymore, they're actually thinking maybe about not living anymore. Sometimes it's even linked to suicide. Is that something that you're thinking, right? So this ability to kind of notice it, to let someone know why you're asking, to name it, right? Very hard to do. I'm not saying it's easy. It can be hard. And it can be super helpful, right? That person feels seen and heard and validated, right? So we do recommend really just sort of exploring some of the things you're noticing and hearing, being able to, if you can, ask about suicide, or, I'll just share with you a story about someone who called me and she was really worried about her son, and she couldn't bring herself to ask him. She was too fearful because she had suicide in her life. And so she reached out to her sister and said to her sister, can you check in with him? And can you make sure you ask him, right? So sometimes it means kind of reaching out to maybe others we have in our life to also check in with, and not trying to handle everything by ourselves.
Yeah, for sure it's a tough conversation to have with kids or everyone. But I was thinking nowadays we also have like this, we're talking more about mental health in more spaces. And I wanted to ask you about your perception. What are the things that we didn't know 10 years ago that we know now about the suicide prevention? Or what are the big changes that you're seeing in your environment, in your patients, when they speak about their problems, or the people that you train to recognize suicide signs?
What are we noticing as big changes in the last 10 years?
Yes. What are the biggest changes that you've seen in your workshops?
Right. I think people are acknowledging, I think there's less stigma, and I think that can be a good thing. I think people are aware that all of us have these these types of things in our families and our workplaces, and I do feel like there's less stigma and definitely more openness. I remember when 10 years ago, if I mentioned I worked in the field I worked at, people would just turn away. And now I do recognize that people are more curious, actually, and I know that people want to get more the skills, and so we do notice that more and more people are coming out to get trained, like parents and workplaces, and just trying to gain more of the skills to be able to manage it. And I also think that people are recognizing, and this is great, that it's about a community response. This is not like an individual problem that one person can fix. Often it does require a community, so families involved, and maybe professional services are involved, and we have places like crisis centers that people can phone in, so that it's a real community effort.
Thank you, Lou. We're getting to the end of the interview, and I wanted to ask you, do you have any recommendations for the public, how they can access these resources, or how can they sign in for this workshops that you do?
Yeah, sure. So if you go to our website, Crisis Center of BC, we offer a variety of trainings, and one that I would highly recommend is something called Safe Talk. It's a half-day training, good for anybody 15 and older. It's a really wonderful training. It's very empowering. I know that's kind of crazy to say when you're talking about suicide, but it is. And that one of the other changes that we're moving into, and I think the Indigenous worldview for this, is we're reminding ourselves that life promotion is important, and so that means taking care of ourselves, right? And that means taking care of our community. So we build that into our suicide prevention training. So yeah, it's on our website. If there's an inability to pay, please do reach out, because we can make it affordable for you, or we just want people to come and get trained.
That was Lou Ripley from the BC Crisis Center. I'm Sebastián Arancibia, and you're listening to 1680 The Crow.
everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika King.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretanero.
And I'm Radhika King. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.
everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretnero.
And I'm Radhika Sikakane. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.
From the Broadcast Center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus, this is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Good afternoon, Burnaby. I'm Richard Davis. Here's what's making news at 2 o'clock. The BC legislature is going to look a little different as Abbotsford South MLA Bruce Banman has jumped ship from the BC United Party to the BC Conservative Party. This means the Conservatives, led by Nechako Lakes MLA John Rustad, previously the party's only MLA, is on par with the BC Green Party. In response, BC United leader Kevin Falcon says Banman, who was elected in 2020, has betrayed the people who voted for him. But Banman says he is now a member of the only provincial party that will do what's right, rather than what's politically convenient or politically correct. Stay tuned to 1680 to the Crow for updates on this story. BC Minister Adrian Dix announced the second phase of expansions to the Burnaby General Hospital, which will cost the province around $1.7 billion. Lachlan Irvin was on the scene.
The second phase will see the demolition of the current West Wing building to make way for a new 12-story inpatient tower, which will house a state-of-the-art BC Cancer Center. Dix says that while the price tag of the renovations isn't cheap, the work being done to bring the hospital into the 21st century is long overdue.
All of these projects have significant cost increases, but we need to build it. People in Burnaby and in this community needed a new hospital for a generation, and these projects were delayed and delayed and delayed. Well, we are proceeding. You can see that action if you go around the building and take a look at phase one, and you can see it through phase two.
Phase 1 of construction is slated to finish by 2025, while the second phase is expected for 2030. Lachlan Irvin, 1680 The Crow.
A North Vancouver medical student studying in Grenada has been found dead after being reported missing. 35-year-old Liam Fisher was last seen during a run last Saturday in Grenada, prompting a search by his fellow medical students and volunteers. His family released a statement today confirming his passing. September is Suicide Prevention Month, and the BC Crisis Centre is offering workshops that train people on how to recognize signs of distress in their peers. Our very own Sebastian Arancibia has more on this story.
An increasing number of people is seeing the conversation around mental health as more of a community struggle than an individual one. Lou Ripley, Director of Community and Learning at BC Crisis Center, is teaching people how to recognize suicide warning signs.
To be aware of maybe changes that you notice. Maybe the person, for a long time seemed very bubbly, and then you notice a significant change in that behavior. Maybe they stopped doing things that they used to do.
Ripley says people can get information about this workshop called Safe Talk at the Crisis Center website. If you or someone you know is in crisis, you can call BC Crisis Line at 1-800-784-2433. Sebastián Arancibia, 1680 The Crow.
Over to Merritt, where documents show the province and the city knew about serious problems with dikes around the Nicola Valley community for 3 years before an atmospheric river caused catastrophic flooding that forced thousands from their homes. The documents were released by the BC office for the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives after it submitted a Freedom of Information request. Details show an engineer raised concerns about erosion and other issues in 2018 and every year until 2021. With his latest report issued just 5 months before an atmospheric river in November of 2021 sent water gushing through downtown Merritt, while torrents elsewhere destroyed communities and infrastructure across southern BC. Researchers say local authorities in BC must maintain their own dikes, but often don't have the money for repairs, so the provincial inspector can issue orders for maintenance, but the documents show no such orders were issued. 20 affordable homes in South Burnaby just opened for people with disabilities, lower and or moderate income. Our reporter Alicia in Alaska has more details about the new homes.
The Susanna Kogan Place is a project started by Tiva Housing Society, partnered with Polygon and BC Housing, who funded the entire purchase of the airspace parcel. The 5-story building started 4 years ago with a cost of $2 million. With the opening of these houses, the city of Burnaby also announced the construction of approximately 1,600 affordable homes. The facilities are now open and receiving new residents. The rent of these complexes will vary in income assistance and disability shelter rates, which are selected from BC housing registries. Alicia Nolasco, 1680, The Crow.
Now, Alicia is actually live with us in studio. So, Alicia, what else was announced in the press conference that gave to the opening of the 20 homes in South Burnaby?
Well, one of the things that were announced in the city's approach to create new affordable housing was like the Burnaby councillor Maita Santiago mentioned 10,000 additional units in development aside from the 1,600 under construction right now.
Now, you mentioned to me before we went on air that you got to talk about the counselor with about future projects.
Yeah, that is correct. In a private interview with her, she mentioned the real need of housing for people under the spectrum. And although this is not a solid plan yet, the city is working hard so it can happen anytime soon.
Thank you so much for joining us, Alicia.
Thank you.
Now, e-cigarettes were first created as a less harmful alternative to cigarettes, but now it's becoming an epidemic. Riley Leung has more on the story.
Vaping has been an ongoing epidemic around youth for years. Though continuing to smoke, some have noticed side effects. Sean, a student at BCIT, is just one of many who have noticed.
I love to play soccer, but I can't play at minimum 20 minutes for learning. So
according to Canada.ca, some short-term side effects have been stated in regards to vaping. Conditions such as coughing, shortness of breath, irritation in the throat, etc. A long-term side effect found from vaping is a condition called popcorn lungs, where permanent scar tissue is formed around the lungs, making it harder to breathe. Just like cigarettes, vaping is just as, if not more, addictive. Riley Leung, 1680 The Crow.
Skilled Trades BC, the organization that oversees the skilled trades in this province, well, they say the number of registered apprentices jumped nearly 10% over the last year. The annual report from Skilled Trades BC says 41,000 registered apprentices and more than 100 trades are now working towards their certifications. The agency predicts 83,000 additional jobs in the trade sector over the next 10 years. It is also pleased that nearly 1,500 Indigenous people entered the trades this year, an increase of 22%, while the number of women exploring underrepresented skilled trades soared nearly 40%. Now to Calgary, where a town south of there has banned alcohol sales in the community for 120 years. Well, they're no longer dry. The council in Cardiston voted Tuesday night to lift the ban after residents voted 53% in favor of the move in a plebiscite in May. Mayor Maggie Cronin says the change could have a big effect in the town, but she trusts its residents. A new bylaw allows alcohol to be sold at restaurants and recreational facilities such as its golf courses, but doesn't allow for the opening of liquor stores. Public health investigators in Alberta are working like detectives to find the cause of an ongoing E. coli outbreak affecting Calgary daycares by interviewing people, gathering evidence, and waiting for the results from lab tests to confirm connections about what caused the bacterial spread. University of British Columbia professor in food safety engineering, Si Young Wong, says they will have taken samples from food handlers, those infected in foods, to try and find a link.
The idea is the same. If you find the same DNA fingerprinting in the crime scene and on the suspect, then that's the most straightforward link, the smoking gun.
There have been 264 lab-confirmed cases of the bacterial infection since the outbreak at 11 daycares was declared on September 4th. Alberta's chief medical officer of health says a central kitchen serving the daycares is almost certainly the source of the infections, but experts say the exact food cause may be more difficult to determine. The case of a former truck driver who caused the deadly Humboldt Broncos bus crash is in federal court, where arguments are being heard today over his possible deportation. Jaskarat Singh Sidhu was sentenced in 2019 to 8 years after pleading guilty to dangerous driving causing death and bodily harm in the Saskatchewan crash that killed 16 people and injured 13 others. The court heard the rookie Calgary trucker, a newly married permanent resident, went through a stop sign at a rural intersection and drove into the path of the bus carrying Humboldt Broncos players and staff in 2018. The Canada Border Services Agency has recommended Sidhu be handed over to the Immigration and Refugee Board to decide whether he should be deported to India. The federal court has agreed to hear the case, but is unlikely to issue a decision today. If Sidhu is successful, the matter will be sent back to the Canada Border Services Agency for another review. Well, most eyes are on the new iPhone 15. French authorities are taking aim at the iPhone 12. Well, they've ordered Apple to withdraw the iPhone 12 from the French market due to the levels of electromagnetic radiation the phone produces. The National Frequency Agency on Tuesday called on Apple to implement all available means to rapidly fix this malfunction for phones already being used. Apple disputed the findings and said the device complies with all regulations governing radiation. The French agency said it recently checked 141 cell phones for electromagnetic waves capable of being absorbed by the body. Moving to sports, where the Vancouver Canadians are set to play the second game of the playoffs against the Everett Aquasox today at Funko Field in Everett. The first pitch is at 7:05. The Seas return to Vancouver this Friday to finish their playoff run. The Canadians took the win last night, 3-0. And, well, the Jays, the affiliate team of the Vancouver Canadians, lost their playoff spot today. They have a chance to redeem themselves in front of the home crowd at Rogers Centre. They'll face off against the Rangers tonight at 4 o'clock, with Yusei Kikuchi expected to take the mound for the Jays and Jordan Montgomery for the Rangers. In local sports now, the Mann Cup is going to a Game 5 as the New West Salmon Bellies took their first victory in the fight for the Cup. They won 11-10 versus the Six Nation Chiefs, and the next game is scheduled today at 7:30 in Queen's Park Arena. During last night's game, New West Mayor Patrick Johnstone tweeted that he's running out of fingernails to bite. Well, he may be out of luck tonight, as the game is set to be another nail-biter. It's 17 degrees and cloudy outside our studio in Burnaby with a high of 21. And it's looking like a sunny week ahead, going up to 21 on Thursday and Friday with a high of 20 on Saturday. I'm Richard Davis for your 2:30 news update on 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.
Everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretnero.
And I'm Radhika Sikakane. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.